So I want to talk about some database options that you can use within your Flutter applications. I want to talk about 4 of the somewhat popular ones. They might be the most popular, but they're definitely at least the ones that people talk about the most within the Flutter community. So first one is the one we use in this course, and it's Firebase. It's developed by Google, and it pairs really well with Flutter. We're going to dive into the documentation of each of these and see kind of what they offer and what their differences are. But let me just run through all of them first. So then we have Supabase. Supabase is an open source alternative to Firebase. It pretty much does whatever Firebase does, but it's open source. Then we have AWS Amplify. Now, AWS is Amazon Web Services, and it's one of the biggest cloud data storage providers out there. And Amplify is their Firebase alternative or competitor. But they do some things a little different, so Firebase or Amplify can be better for different solutions. And lastly, something new is called ServerPod. This is if you want to write your own backend. So if we go to the Firebase documentation, this is our first and most popular one. So they don't even call Firebase a backend, they call it an app development platform that helps you build apps and games users love, backed by Google, trusted by millions. So like I said, it's kind of more than a whole backend. It does so much for you. If you scroll down here, you have all these different solutions it gives you. So you could build your apps using Cloud Firestore authentication, some other stuff, storage, hosting, cloud functions. Some of these we will use within this course. But also lets you release and monitor your apps. So whether your app's crashing, the actual release process, some analytics about your app, and even engage with it. You can send out messages, do some A/B testing on your application. There's just so much you can do with Firebase. It's like an all-in-one tool for making your apps good. And it has great support for Flutter. Flutter is built by Google. Firebase is built by Google. They work really well together. Now, the next database is Supabase. So Supabase, you can read through, is an open source Firebase alternative. So it does a lot of the similar things. So you have a database, you have authentication, storage, and functions just like you do in Firebase. And the nice thing here is while Firebase is a NoSQL database, with Supabase you interact with it in a similar way, but it uses Postgres, which is the most trusted relational database in the world, which is pretty cool. So then we have AWS Amplify. So you see the site looks a little bit more rugged because they know they have a good service in terms of cloud storage and all of that. They don't need to market it as much as the other ones, but while their storage and cloud services are very robust and have been around for a while, AWS Amplify is a newer backend as a service by AWS. And it also offers a lot of the same things the other ones offer. But one of its big differences is that it actually uses GraphQL for its storage. You go over to the documentation, you see they have an API for REST and an API for GraphQL. Now, I'm not going to go into a crazy explanation of what GraphQL is, but you could think of GraphQL as being a different way to interact with the database. It's a little bit more complex, but the nice benefit you get here is it's a bit faster and more efficient because you can query results more to exactly what you want. So depending on what you are building, it might be a really good solution to go with a GraphQL API with AWS Amplify. Now, all 3 of these options have been backend services, which do a lot of the heavy lifting for you in terms of all the backend related things. Like for authentication, you don't have to worry about storing passwords, making sure they're encrypted and all that stuff. And you don't really have to worry about scaling or good uptime because they handle all of that for you. But if you did want to write your own backend, you could do something like ServerPod, which is a popular way to write server logic with Dart. So like this description says, ServerPod is an open source scalable app server written in Dart for the Flutter community. Now it is pretty new, but it's developed by some people that have been known in the Flutter community to be great developers, and it's gotten a lot of attention within the Flutter community. Now, of course, you can build your backend with other more popular tools like Node.js, but personally for me, I like to stick to the backend services just because they make my life a lot easier. My first choice is usually Firebase just because it works so well with Flutter, but depending on what you need, Supabase and AWS Amplify are great options too. Now, if you really want to customize it and write your own backend, ServerPod sounds like a fun solution to try to implement yourself.